Application Commentary, Kate Lawson Younger Jr. describes Samson's life to be split into two parallels: birth from a barren mother and death from a disabled warrior. How do we get from point A to point B? Let's start at the beginning. Samson's birth was prophesied by an angel who foretold him to be a Nazarite to God. A Nazarite is someone who abstains from alcohol, touching unclean things, and cutting his hair. Samson was also destined to deliver the Israelites from the hand of the Philistines, people who were tormenting them for 40 years. As Samson grew, so did his muscles. He was able to take down a young lion with his bare hands and lift up the gates of a city and carry it to the top of a hill. Throughout his life, later on in his life, he met and fell in love with a Philistine woman. Yes, a woman from the very people he was meant to destroy. They wed and had a feast, and at this feast, he challenged 30 other guests that they would not be able to answer his riddle. They couldn't, threatened his wife into telling them the answer. And when they answered correctly, Samson was enraged, set fire to their crops using 300 foxes and torches of all things. The result of this was the death of his wife and father-in-law at the hand of the Philistines. Samson escaped to the rocks, and there 3,000 Judah men found him, wanting to deliver him to the Philistines. They promised not to kill him, only to deliver him. When he arrived, the ropes binding his skin and his hand and his arms melted off of his skin like wax by the Spirit of the Lord. And he took down 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. Then he escaped and met and fell in love with the Philistine woman. If you think you're having deja vu, think again. For this is the second Philistine woman that he met and fell in love with. But this woman was a bit different than the others. Her name was Delilah. Now, Delilah was being ordered by the Philistine Lord to seduce Samson to find out where his strengths lie. She's being offered 1,000 pieces of silver for this. So 3 times she asked him, "Samson, where do your strengths lie?" 3 times he lied to her. Naturally, she began to question his love for her. Did he not trust her? Did he not treasure her as a husband does? So day after day, she questioned him, tormenting him with questions, asking, "Where do your strengths lie?" And as most husbands do, he caved. "Delilah," he said, "my strength lies in my hair. Cut it, and I will be as any other man." So in the night, Delilah had him fall asleep on her lap, and she called in a man to come and cut his hair. Now, I'm aware that this is a process that some of you may be unfamiliar with, so I'd like to call in my assistant. This is what Delilah would have done to Samson. And she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you!" And they bound him, gouged out his eyes, and they set him to work in the prison. And all that Delilah had was his hair. And now the Philistines wanted to celebrate this great achievement. So they had a great feast and a great house, and they called in Samson to come and entertain them, setting him between 2 pillars, one on his right and one on his left. Now, something you need to know about this house is that inside were all the Philistine lords, and on the roof were 3,000 men and women. And Samson asked God, "Let me die with the Philistines." And so, putting all of his weight on both of the pillars, he leaned. And down came the house on the men, the women, the lords, and on Samson. Though Samson went against the set laws for a Nazarite, God still used him in the way he promised he would. Proverbs 16:1 says, "The plans of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord." This shows us that God can still use broken people for his great purposes. Thank you.